Welcome back, guys, to another episode of Benny and the Guest. With you, as always, is me, Ben. I'm joined today by a new friend I met, Leo Banuelos. Leo, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hey man, it's a pleasure to be on this podcast, and it's weird to be on the receiving end of this one.
Yeah, Leo actually runs. It's called Wet Boots Podcast. I actually saw it like on, I think it was similar or something on some of the podcasts I listen to, and I started listening to his, and I not only noticed that we had a similar timeline of doing our podcast, but he has kind of. I started out doing some military people. I still do, but his is a lot more focused on it and stuff, and it's got a lot of really good content. And I reached out. He came on. So Leo, I'm happy to have you. We're gonna dive right in. If you can tell us a little bit about where you're from, how you're raised, like what kind of went on there in that situation.
Yeah, man. So my name is Leo Banuelos. I run Wet Boots Podcast. I'm 32. I'm a fat piece of shit.
Aren't we all?
I can still pass tape though. It's all good.
Yeah.
I'm originally from LA. I was born in LA, but I was mainly raised in Mexico. So a lot of my childhood up until I started school was in Mexico. When I started school, I started going back and forth from Mexico to the southern San Diego area. So every day was crossing the border twice a day. Uh, yeah, and I grew up in a very poor area. Now it's very much gentrified. In 2000, like 10, 2014, they just got like a Walmart, so that was fucking pretty exciting.
Yeah.
They had a Walmart, they had like a movie theater, so that was pretty fucking exciting. I didn't get to see it, but I got to see it, but I never got to go in it. Yeah, so that was pretty much my life growing up. I was just to kind of paint you a picture. We didn't have any running water until I was like 6. So yeah, that was very fun. So
And
growing up, I
no, sorry, you said you were going back and forth a lot.
yeah.
Do you remember a lot of that? Like, do you actually remember doing that, or was it just kind of?
Well, I mean, parts of them still kind of stick in my memory just
Yeah.
because of the fact that there was some things like back then, border laws were a little bit more relaxed.
Right.
I do remember my dad telling me my dad telling me when I was like an infant, he was crossing through the border, and they were like, "What's your name?" He said his name. They're like, "Who the fuck is that? Whose fucking goddamn white baby is that?" And then because my dad's brown as shit and I'm
Yeah.
not very, I'm very fair skinned, and they're like, "Whose fucking goddamn white baby is that?" And he's like, "That's my baby. Here's my ID. Here's his birth certificate." Because I was like only a couple months old, so they couldn't get any identification or passport on me, and they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, good, yeah, fucking okay, sure, that's
Oh
your fucking
man.
baby." But I do remember being stuck at the border a lot. I was late to school a lot because of the traffic, and I did have like an identification card, like California ID card at the time, and they would just look at me, look at the card, and just be like, "What's your phone number?" And I could never remember the goddamn phone number for some fucking reason. But yeah, I was crossing the border in the morning and then at night to go back home. That's pretty much my childhood. I didn't really, so yeah, I didn't know what American candy was. I don't want to say it was very sheltered, but I was just a sick kid. I was allergic to everything. One time I had like a really bad fever because a teacher gave me a fucking orange lifesaver, fucking weak jeans type shit.
Oh
It
wow.
was bad. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was
but
bad.
Mexican candy's better anyway.
Well, going back to it, yes, Mexican candy is way better, and the lead should have like my immune system was barely getting used to the lead at that point because every fucking candy had lead.
Yeah.
Now they don't have them anymore. Now they don't have them anymore. So I'm like, you know what? But my immune system was barely getting used to the lead, and the American candy just fucked my system. But it taught me a lot, and it it taught me a lot about being resilient and just kind of like just chilling and just hanging out, figuring out what the next thing is. Because I'm the youngest child and I was very sick. So like a lot of people were like, looking after me, like my brothers, my sisters, parents were always looking after me. They thought I was going to die at some point. I'm like, well, you know what? We're all going to die. But they're like, yeah, but we didn't want to get a coffin for like a fucking six month-year-old. And I was like, shh. But yeah,
How many brothers and
that's,
sisters you got? Like, how big's this family?
it's not very big. I mean, it's not the traditional Mexican family. I
What?
only have two older brothers and one older sister,
Oh,
but
okay.
I do have a cousin. If he's listening, shout out Pablo and Juan. They are two of nine.
Oh, damn.
They are two of nine, so they're traditional fucking work. You
I
know, they're
didn't mean it
traditional.
like that. I was just like, damn, that's big. 9
They're
people.
traditional Catholic family. Like
Yeah,
they don't
yeah.
believe in protection.
Yeah.
Fuck
Just
the
keep
Plan
having
B.
them till you can't.
That
Yeah.
is blasphemous. So it's like, that's why they got nine siblings.
Damn. LA, is that where you went through like middle school, high school and all that, or?
No, when I first started school, I started in kindergarten, and my first day of kindergarten, my mom says that she passed. This was in lower southern San Diego area, so like Chula Vista,
Okay.
and it's like 5 minutes from the border, literally. So my mom said that she passed by a school. There's a bunch of kids, and she was like, "When's the registration?" And she's like, I guess somebody was like, "This is the first day," and so she was like, "All right, here you go," and just dropped me off at the school. Mind you, I had no idea. I'd never spoke any English. I was just like, "Okay, I'm just in this place right now. Cool, sounds good." And I didn't know a lick of English until,
Damn.
yeah. And looking back on it, but Chula Vista is where I pretty much grew. Chula Vista in Mexico is pretty much where I grew up. I went to school in Chula Vista, elementary, middle school, and high school there. And I didn't really start knowing English until I was like about fifth or sixth grade or something like that. But I do vividly remember one of the ladies that worked at the school uh, taking me to like an empty classroom, just made me read books for like years, and then out of nowhere, she's like, "Okay, you're good," and I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, you don't have to read anymore," and I was like, "Okay."
Because you
So I
spoke
asked my mom
English?
so I asked my mom about this a couple years ago, and she's like, "Well, the school had a program for kids who didn't know who English was a second language to teach them English a lot more and get rid of their accent." And I was like, "Oh shit!" So yeah, that was interesting.
That's kind of cool though that they used books at least to help you learn, I guess. Like,
They were recording it for sure.
yeah.
I remember them recording it to
That's
like listen back to my fucking accent. But I mean,
those are what did it
that was
now. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That was a weird time. That it was weird. It was a weird realization because I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
What the fuck is going on? But yeah, I went to high school, middle school, and didn't really do much in high school. I mean, I wasn't like a star player. I didn't play any sports. Was not very smart at all. Uh, Knew English like a motherfucker. I would do all my essays like right after, like right before they were done, like right before they were due. Um, but that's where I graduated high school, and I don't think I've ever talked about this, but I graduated high school, and I was with my ex girlfriend at the time, and we broke up, and I was like, you know what, fuck this, I'm leaving, and so I fucking joined the army, dude.
You were
I,
just like,
I
I'm out of here. That's it. That's
pretty
the only
much,
reason. Yeah.
I was like, I'm out of here, and I knew I wanted to join the army because, in hindsight, I probably should have chosen. I probably should have chosen
Fuck
something
this amount.
yeah, but but there were several reasons. That was just kind of like the icing on the cake. But I was in school, I was in college. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. My brothers both did border patrol. Didn't want to work in a prison, checking dudes' balls for fucking contraband. So I was like, what can get me out of here? So I did a little bit of research, and I realized that the only army base in California was Fort Irwin, which is like 6 hours up north from where I was. So I was like, I don't want to be back in California. And California had Marine, Air Force, Coast Guard, like
Yeah.
a motherfucker. So I was just like, you know what? Army's the only place where I'm gonna go and not come back. So I just joined the army, and it was a very hasty enlistment because I walked in the recruiter's office like fucking May or June of 2012. And like every day I would go in and be like, "Hey, what do you guys got? What do you guys got?" And I didn't want to be infantry. I wanted to like because my thought process behind it was like I want to leave the army with a trade.
Yeah. Some
And so
type
they're
of
like,
skill. Yeah.
yeah, some type of skill, right? So I'm like, what can I do? And they're like, infantry, infantry, infantry. And it wasn't until July where they're like, well, this one leaves, but I wanted the one that left the fastest.
Yeah.
right? Because they were all like, this leaves next year, this leaves in July and shit like that. And I was like, nah, fuck that. I want to leave sooner. And so at some point they were like, well, this one leaves in September. And I was like, I'll take that. And they're like, okay. And I signed the papers. They gave me a couple pens. They gave me a little bit of swag. They didn't give me any
Yeah,
shirts, those fucking motherfuckers. I think I just got pens. I really think I just got pens.
I think I got a
And
PT shirt, which is so
I didn't even
whack.
get that.
What,
I
yeah,
didn't
but
even get that.
it's probably used or something. Yeah, they all that the recruiters didn't have cool stuff like that long ago. It wasn't always cool gear to get.
No, it wasn't always cool gear and it wasn't always bonuses. It was just
No,
like, hey,
hell
we're
no.
here. It was just
Yeah,
like, hey, we're here. If you want to join, cool. If you don't, suck a dick. I don't know,
absolutely.
But that's how the culture was back then.
Yeah.
So they were like, this one leaves in September, and I was like, cool, I'll take it. Sign the papers, not knowing what. Mind you, I didn't know what job I was gonna do. And then they were like, but this is not infantry, and I was like, cool. And so I specifically remember as I was leaving with like my folder of papers ready to go to MEPS, I was like, wait, what job am I going to get? And they're like, you're going to be a mechanic. And I was like, okay, that's something. I was like, that's a trade. As I was walking out, they're like, oh yeah, you're also going to be airborne. And I was like, what does that mean?
Oh yeah.
And they're like, you're going to jump out of planes. And I was like, okay, cool. I fucking waited till the last minute up until I was going to go to MEPS. Told my mom that I was going to the army, and she's like, "Is it too late to get out of this?" And I was like, "I don't think so." I mean, I was like, "I think so. I think it's too late for this shit." So left, went to MEPS and all that good stuff, and then I went to basic training. That was kind of a culture shock, uh, to be honest. The peanut butter shot. I don't really remember much about basic training except the peanut butter shot. That shit hurt. Yeah, and they're like, "Squat," and I'm like, "What?" No, I just squat, it'll go away, and I'm like, "Fuck, dude,
Yeah.
fuck this." At that moment, I was like, "Shit, man, this sucks."
That is one of the
But
worst moments when you're going through it. Like, they don't tell you about. Nobody tells you about any of that stuff. So you're
no.
like, what? And then you're sitting there with a golf ball up your ass, and you're like, this is miserable. I
Yeah,
hate everything right now.
and it's so funny because, I mean, a lot of people were when at the time when COVID came around, a lot of people were refusing the vaccine, right? Now I know I'm
Yeah.
jumping ahead quite a bit, but
No, it's so good.
they were like I'm refusing the vaccine. Nobody knows what's in it, and I'm like, in my I didn't have a choice because I was in the schoolhouse at the time, but I was like, the army's already given me a bunch of shit that I don't know what's in it. Like every year we have to get a bunch of vaccinations, and I always get sick as fuck. What's another one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like what's another one? If I get sick, okay, I get sick. If I die, then okay, I fucking died. Do me a fucking favor. Like it wasn't really anything to me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't really remember much from basic training. But actually, no. I do remember drill sergeant fucking slapped a girl with his hat because he said
Ooh.
she wasn't doing push-ups correctly, and he had just gotten back from Iraq like a month ago,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he was fucking hot. He was heated. And so she was talking back to him. She was saying that, like, you don't know how to count, you don't know how to do push-ups. He just grabbed his hat. She's like, bah! She started crying, and they're like, drill sergeant.
Yes. Yes. It's awesome.
I was like,
Yeah.
holy
That pumps me
shit.
up.
I was like, holy shit, the fuck is going on? They're like, Drill Sergeant Allen, you can't be doing that shit. So I don't know what fucking happened to him, but I know I did keep seeing him throughout the cycle.
Hmm.
After that, I think I went to fucking AIT. Yeah, AIT and then airborne school.
Yeah.
Most memorable thing about AIT was that two people got married.
Of course they did.
Yeah, they got caught having sex in the laundry room, and then like 2 weeks later they were married. I remember, yeah, that was wild as fuck. I remember like our brief from our we didn't have drill sergeants back then. We just had platoon sergeants,
Right.
and our platoon sergeant's like, listen, this is one of my last cycles. I'm not gonna fucking take care of y'all. Do whatever you want, just don't get caught. And we're like, cool, too easy. So we were in South Carolina because I was a mechanic for a couple of years.
Oh yeah.
I was a mechanic, so we were in South Carolina. Now that AIT's in Virginia, but we would go out like every fucking weekend. And I'm not gonna say the timeline, but what may or may not have been 21, but I was just getting fucked up, staying in a hotel. Like a bunch of us would pull up.
So you guys had all the you could do whatever the hell you wanted basically in that
Pretty
last part.
much.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. There was restrictions, but my platoon sergeant was like, as long as you don't get caught, I really don't care.
Do you ever find that odd that like every AIT story you hear, no matter if they're 18, 25, or 35, people just turn into animals there. Like, I don't know
Not
what the
really.
problem.
Not really, because I
So?
understand it. I understand it because a lot of people that join the military, I mean, everybody has different reasons for joining the military,
Yeah,
right? But when you're around so much testosterone, when you're around so much rambunctiousness, right? You're around all, I mean, and for lack of a better word, you're around all this tomfoolery because you have so much freedom that you've never had before. Like I mean, I'm not gonna fucking incriminate myself, but this was nothing new to me, right? A lot
true.
of people
Yeah,
were
true.
a lot of people were sheltered, what like were like great, like honor students, band and shit like that, and then they're like, I'm gonna join the military because my grandpa was in World War II. And it's like, great, cool, good for you. But they were so sheltered that now they have all this freedom. They don't know what to do with it, so they act a fool, and they have this opportunity to do whatever they want, and they're like, I don't know how to act.
Yeah,
That really shows when you're out drinking with people at such a
absolutely.
young age, you know. And that's pretty much what happens. People don't really know how to act with all that freedom and what to do with it, so they're just like, I'm gonna go balls to the wall, you
Yeah.
know.
I
And
I just finished 3 years as a drill at AIT,
ooh,
and it was, yeah, but that's exactly it. That's true. A lot of the stories you hear were people that were a lot of good. It's either goody two shoes that like had like a very solid life, but it was a lot of constriction, or you
yeah.
have the other side where it was like nobody told me what to do, and I do what I want, So fuck you. And that I never thought of it like that though. Um, that's crazy.
But I
You
mean,
bring,
it's true. Like
yeah, you bring
you
back the
could,
memories because my AIT was like that. Like not to that extent, but like very similar of like people just losing their minds on the weekends because they were able to do whatever they wanted, and like it's just odd seeing grown people act that way. But that's a good explanation.
it's odd seeing them act that way, and it's odd seeing them just act, for lack of better words, act a fool in a sense. And then you start to talk to them, and they're like, "Yeah, my dad was a banker, my mom was a fucking, worked as a teacher or some shit like that." So that's where you kind of start being like, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense now. That makes a lot of sense."
Yeah.
But that's just kind of like how it is, you know. You're in the army, nobody's fucking really looking after you, nobody's really supervising you, so just kind of do whatever you want.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, no,
So
once you do stuff, like, once you get regular army too, it's like, once you're done with the workday, like, you're an adult. Go do
uh,
whatever.
yeah, well, yeah, I got some stories on that one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
so I went to airborne school, and the only notable thing about airborne school was that I didn't. So I obviously knew in airborne school that somebody had to jump first, right? And I was pretty quiet, you know. I'd go out, get fucked up, come back, you know. But I wouldn't really. I didn't catch too much attention because I was like, you know, I just got to make it to my first unit. I knew there would have to be a first jumper, but I didn't want to be first jumper because I was like, I want this
No,
is all
nobody
new to
does.
me.
You
Nobody
never,
does,
you
right?
never want to do that.
Everybody wants time to freak out.
Yeah.
So we get rigged, you know, the fucking wait to like sit around, like hurry up and wait, get rigged up and all that shit. And so we're loading up the bird, first jump, and I'm like, cool. I'm at the end, and I'm like, cool. I'm the last one. I'm good to go. I can see I'm gonna be the last one to jump. That's the mentality that I went into it. Because I'm at the end of the line, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I walk in, we walk into the airplane, we sit down, we sit down, and I'm like, cool, cool. And I'm looking to my left because I was one of the doors, but I look to my left and I'm like, there's a door down there. I'm gonna be the last one. I have enough time to freak out. Too easy. Cool. So we're sitting down, and then the fucking the plane fucking takes off, and then out of nowhere, the jump masters are like, stand up, and I'm like, why are you
Yeah.
next to
Why are
me?
you standing right here by the door?
Yeah, I'm like, the door's over there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like hook up. So I'm like, okay, hook up. I'm like, are we gonna turn around at some point? And I'm like fucking waiting. I'm like hooked up, and he's like, stand by, and they shove me to the door,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
like face to face with the door, and I'm like, I have no
Yeah, the
option.
guy like grabs your hips and turns you, and you're
Yeah.
like right there, and you're like,
And,
oh
and
my
I'm like,
fucking
and
god.
I'm like inching back, and he's like, nah, bitch, and he just like pushes me forward. So I'm like, oh fuck, oh shit, my knees are shaking. I'm freaking out. Soon as I see that green light and that slap on my ass, I have no other option but just to fucking go, man. It was terrible. I fucking hated the experience.
Hmm.
I hated every single bit about it. And I was the first jumper every single jump after
Every single jump.
every single jump in airborne school. Yeah, it was terrible because I
Damn.
was like, okay, if I get first jumper after this, I've already done it. I know what to expect, and if I
Yeah.
don't, great. Somehow I was always the first jumper, and I did not like that.
Damn.
It was terrible.
I
I
only had to
hated
do
it.
it once, and it was a true nightmare because I did a night one. It was a night one for me, my first night jump,
Yeah,
and you're just staring in the abyss, and you're like,
pretty much.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna
night
die.
jumps are terrible.
But even jumping in general, because I did airborne school, and then I'd only got to do two before I went drill, and you're just literally like every time I'm thinking I'm gonna die now, I'm gonna fall, but
Pretty much.
it's
Pretty
crazy.
much.
Did you
So,
enjoy all that though? Like, did you enjoy that experience, or was it just man?
I mean, I don't remember much of it. I think it was just let's get it over with so I can get to my first unit and like learn my job, try to figure out what the fuck was going on.
Yeah,
I was just pretty much disassociating at that point. I was like, I don't want to know. I don't want to remember any of this.
yeah.
I don't want to remember the fear and all that shit.
That's true. When you're going through schools like that, you kind of like dissociate. Like you're just like, I just want to get through it. I just want to get through it.
The best way to go through any school is just to unplug your brain and just do what you need to do. That's
Absolutely.
literally that's the best way to go out through it. To go out there any school.
Yeah.
So after I went to airborne school, I got to my first unit. I went to 82nd as a mechanic. Uh, Spent 7 years as a mechanic there, and spent 7 years because in the same in the same company.
7 years in the same company.
Yeah, yeah. People were re-enlisting to get to new units and shit like that. People were
Damn.
re-enlisting to get to new units. People were getting out. Like it was bad. And I talked about this in my last episode that back then, back in like 2013 or so, there was no pride in being airborne. There was no pride in being in the 82nd.
Yeah.
We all hated our lives. We all hated being there, but we just kind of, just drove on. And that's pretty much what the climate was. Like everybody fucking hated their lives. Now it's completely different. Now there's a sense of pride in the 82nd. Now there's a sense of pride in the airborne. I don't know what fucking shifted, but
Yeah.
I
Like,
was like,
yeah.
it
What happened
sucks.
between that and that? Like, no significant event happened, but I mean, like, definitely there is like crazy pride for 82nd. Like every
Now,
Marine
yeah,
boy
now
you
there
talk to.
is.
Yeah.
Now there is, but back then we were like, fuck this, man. We didn't fucking like any of that shit. But I had my first deployment in 2014. Went to Afghanistan. Uh, Pretty much was a fob it there. Just worked as a mechanic. So nothing really happened afterwards. But before between 2014 and 2017, I was yeah. Actually, no, nothing really. I mean, nothing really notable happened that I can remember. 2017, I had my second deployment. That's where I went out the wire more because I was a Hotel 8 guy,
Oh
pretty
yeah,
much
the
a tow
recovery.
truck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was pretty much a tow truck for people, and I was on fucking mission like every other day. That shit
Yeah.
sucked. We
Well, you
got a bunch
probably
of
sorry at that point you said 7 years at you whatever, but
so yes. At 2017, I was like 4 years into being in the 82nd, so like 5 years in being in the army.
yes, you're really trusted at that point, probably in the unit, right? Like, or you're known at least well.
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I still hated it. I still hated every
Sure.
second of it. Looking back on it, it wasn't too bad, but I still hated it, and I knew I wanted to do something different. So my plan was to, at that point, when I got back from deployment, well, in deployment, you know, we had a bunch of incoming fire. We kicked a bunch of dudes off the fob. Something fun that we did was we tore down the Rockasons that the 101st put up
Hell
as they
yeah.
were leaving.
The
As they
Tories
were,
or whatever.
yeah, the Tor. It's not the
Yeah.
Torah, but yeah,
No,
yeah. You
Tory.
said
Yeah.
no, yeah, you said Tory, but I was thinking about Torah
Oh,
for some fucking reason. um, but they had this
101st
big,
Jewish Division. Yeah.
yeah, they had this big Rockason right at the talk, and our first like 2 weeks there, I just remember being in the talk, and our S3 fucking commander was like, "We're gonna take that shit down." And I was like, "Cool." Everybody's like, "Hell yeah!" And then he's like, "How can we take it down?" And then my commander was like, "Well, we got a bunch of like wreckers and shit. We can take that down that way. So we're like, all right, cool. So we fucking took it down while they were still there. So it was a big fuck you to 101st.
Nice.
And I thought that was hilarious. But yeah, my time there was pretty much spent in the talk, keeping an eye on the eye in the sky, seeing a lot of shit happen in different drone feeds going out the wire. I wasn't once out the wire for like 8 hours because this motherfucker. So these guys got stuck, right? And these guys got stuck. They called for recovery. They were stuck in sand. So I went out there, hooked up my winch, and I was like, "Hey man, when I tell you to take the truck off of park, put it in neutral." He's like, "All right, I got you. I got you." It's fucking Sarmoda. Shout out Sarmoda. I hated you for that part, but shout out Sarmoda. He's like, "All right, I got you." I was like, "All right, cool." So I'm winching this shit in, and then out of nowhere, the truck goes back. And I'm like, "Stop, stop, stop." And he's like, "What happened?" And I'm like, why'd you accelerate?" He's like, "I thought I was taking it out." And I'm like, "I told you to put that shit in neutral." So I spent 8 hours out there because the winch wrapped around like 10 times around the axle and the
Oh
wheel hub.
no.
So that was and I thought I could just, loosen it up and just pull it with my hands. Nah, it
Yeah.
was
No, it's
wedged
tight,
in there. And
tight.
I was like,
Yeah.
fuck, we got back. It's terrible. Every fucking mission that I got back, I had to go back to the talk and be like, "Hey, recovery mission's back." And they're like, "All right, cool." But they would always laugh at me because getting into the fob, we had like a little maze. Whether they would they would laugh at me if I was towing a truck because and you a wrecker's like the size of an LHS. On top of that, I'm towing a fucking Max Pro or an MTV.
Right. So it looks crazy. You trying to weave through the Jersey barriers and shit, the T walls and whatever's up.
It would take me like an hour. It would take me like an hour just to get through to that. Cause I'd have to make a turn and I'm like, fuck, I'm not gonna make it. The truck's about to hit the berms. I'm like, fuck. So I'd have to go back. And it was like 15 minutes every fucking turn. There was like 6 turns to get into the fucking fob. So whenever I'd go back and be like, "Hey, recovery mission's back," they're like, "You good?" And I was like, "No, dude, fuck you guys. It's 4 a.m. I want to go to sleep."
Yeah.
So I got back and I think at that point I was married. I knew I wanted to do something else. I put in my packet for BLC and I put in my packet for BLC and one day out of nowhere my commander, I'm not gonna, I hope he's living under a bridge. My commander called me into his office with my platoon sergeant and I thought I fucked up. And he's like, "Hey man, so what do you want to do in the Army?" And I was like, "Well, honestly, I would love to try my hand at SOAR as a mechanic. Or if I don't do that, I would love to go civil affairs selection. If I don't get picked up for that, I'd like to go to PSYOP selection. But I know I want to do something else." And he's like, "Well, I mean, what's the point of sending you to BLC to do all these things if you're just gonna leave?" And I was like,
Oh no.
"What?" And it was such a shock to me because I had not done anything to piss this guy off. Didn't have any fucking negative counselings. I was fine. Like I was fine. And he was just like, "Yeah, what's the point of spending all this money to send you to BLC if you're just gonna leave?" And I was like, I think the conversation was like 30 minutes, but at the end I was like, Are you saying that you're not gonna send me to BLC because I don't want to stay here?" And he's like, "Well, I'm not saying that because that'd be illegal, immoral, and unethical."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "So why aren't you sending me?" He's like, "I just don't see a good reason to." And I was like, "All right." I knew I wasn't going to get anywhere with this guy. So I was like, fuck it. So I just left his office. And in the parking lot, my platoon sergeant was like, "I didn't expect that to go that way. I didn't know what the fuck was going on." And I was just so fucking upset. And I smoked his whole pack of Marlboro Reds and I just yelled at him for like 45 minutes.
Do you think, looking back, sorry, this is,
No, you're fine.
I love hearing that type of stuff. I don't love hearing that because get fucked over. But looking back, do you think that your platoon sergeant actually probably had another conversation with them that was like defending your ass? Because that just seems insane that he just comes in there like railroading you guys and you guys just got to take that.
Not really, because it was one of those things that we were in the motor pool and I don't know where he's like, "Hey, the commander wants to see us." And he's like, I don't know
Oh,
what it's
so he kind
about.
of blindside. It was kind of a
Yeah,
blindside. Yeah,
it
yeah,
was
yeah.
it was a total blindside, and
Okay.
it wasn't like I left the office and he stayed back for a couple minutes. Like we both left, and I was like, I smoked his whole pack of Marlboro Reds, and I was pissed, and I was just yelling at him for like a good 45 minutes. And towards the end of it, he's like, "Listen, man, I know you're not mad at me. I know you're just getting this out there. I know you have to, so I'm not gonna take offense to any of this." Because I was calling him a piece of shit, and I was
Yeah, yeah,
fucking
yeah.
going off,
As
right?
one does.
But I mean, he wasn't. He was a good person, but I wasn't.
No.
And he understood that, and so he's like, "All right, man. Like, I mean, well, I'll just let you vent." And so I just stayed there for a couple more years, and then finally, it took one of my commanders. Oh, sorry. It took one of my commanders to
Oh, it
ask
sounded
me.
good. Don't worry.
Sorry, my neck just cracked. That felt so good. One of my commanders asked me like what I was doing there and what I wanted to do. And actually, no, I have another story about that fucking commander. Um, I had a sorry, I had a. This was after he told me he wasn't going to send me to BLC. Right, I had a bad jump. I had a concussion. Went to the hospital. They're like, he's concussed. Just make sure he's good. I was like, all right, cool. This is probably like on a Thursday or Friday. Monday, I was in combatives level 2, and I remember throwing up a bunch of times before lunch. And I vaguely remember one of the instructors being like, "Dude, are you fucked up? Like, are you drunk?" And I was like, "Nah, I'm not." And luckily one of my buddies was there, like from the platoon. He was there doing the course with me, and he's like, "Nah, he just had a really bad jump on Friday, and like he had a concussion." And the guy was like, "Take him to Womack now."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay." So they sent me to Womack, and I was on quarters for a couple days. Went back like Thursday or Friday that same week, right? And my commander, first thing in the morning, comes up to me. He's like, "I heard you had a rough week last week." And I was like, "Yeah, I did." And he's like, "Did you have fun?" And I was like, "No, I was in the hospital for a while." He's like, "Yeah, I bet you were." And I was like, "Okay." And that's all that came up. That came from that conversation.
Yeah.
Turns out, some other dude, while I was in the hospital, some other dude had gotten so fucked up in the barracks that for some reason he walked down to the CQ desk, threw up all over the couch, threw up all over the
Of
couch,
course.
and was like acting a fool. And for some reason, he thought that was me.
Oh, okay.
But mind you, this was after he told me he wasn't going to send me to BLC. So I was like, what the fuck is happening? And some people had to tell me, because I was telling people, I was like, yeah, it was a weird interaction with the commander. And they're like, oh yeah, because fucking this guy fucking threw up all over the CQ desk and the fucking couch. And I was like, oh fuck, he thinks that was me. I was like, shit, man. So yeah, I stayed there for a little while until one an incoming commander, like another commander, was like, "What do you want to do? What are you, just being a regular person?" And I was like, "Well, I want to go to CA selection." He's like, "Why don't you go?" And I was like, "Well, I had some problems." Mind you, at this point, I was like already in E5 and shit like that. And
Yeah.
so he's like, "Just put your paperwork in, dude. I'll make sure it gets taken care of." And I was like, "Okay." So I put it in, left command. And I think it was when I did my commander that I did my episode with, Adam. He also asked me the same thing, and I put my paperwork through, and he's like, "Yeah, I got you." So I was like, "Fuck, too easy." So I went to selection, fucked up my ankle like the first couple days. And mind you, CA selection is only like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Fucked up my ankle the first couple days on the obstacle course. I knew it was fucked up. I knew it was fucked because I finished the obstacle course, and I was like the front of the pack, so I had enough time to take my boot off to look at my ankle. Maybe 10, 15 minutes after I got hurt, I looked at my ankle. That shit was black, literally
Oh
black.
shit.
And I'm like, fuck. And one of the guys that was with me, excuse me, going through selection with me, he was a medic. He's like, that shit's fucked. And I was like, fuck. And he's like, what are you gonna do? And I was like, if I go to the medics, they're gonna drop me.
Yeah,
They're
you're
gonna med
gone.
drop me. So I was
Yeah.
like, I'm just gonna keep going. So I did the ruck march with a fucked up ankle. I did the rest of the selection with a fucked up ankle. At graduation, one of the cadre came up to me. He's like, "Hey man, we have a mutual we have a mutual friend in common, and she told me to look after you." And I was like, "Oh yeah, she told me." And he's like, "Yeah, don't say her name." But anyways, he's like, "Don't say her name." But I was like, "Okay." He's like, "Yeah, she told me to look after you. You didn't need anybody to look after you. You fucking made it." And I was like, "Cool." It was a good feeling.
Yeah.
And then I know her. He's like, what are you gonna do about that ankle? And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, that ankle's fucked, man. And I was like, I don't know. I tried to play it off. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, go to Womack or something, like as soon as you get back. And I was like, all right. And he's like, yeah, that ankle's fucked. So I went as soon as I got back. I think I got back like on a Friday or something like that. The week after I went, and my unit was doing an FTX. So there was nobody to look at me, and I didn't want to spend 6 hours at Womack. So I was like, I guess I'll just keep going until I
Oh
get
my
back.
god.
Yeah. So I went
It's
to
black. Oh my
it
god.
was it was bad, dude. It was
Yeah.
fucking bad. And so I finally got seen through the army medical process. I was able to see a podiatrist, and he's like, "Well, you need to be in a boot for a couple weeks." And I was like, "All right, cool. How am I supposed to walk around on this?" And he's like, "I'll give you a scooter, like one of those where you put your knee up, shit like that." I was like, "Too easy." And I was still being a mechanic with a scooter with a boot on my fucking foot, and I didn't know anything. I didn't know any better. I
I
was just
just
like, "All
imagine you
right,
trying
cool."
to like do stuff on the trucks.
Dude, I
Put
was
your
still
get your
climbing it.
scooter up
I was
there.
still climbing LMTVs. I was still
Yeah.
climbing LHSs like nothing. And I mean, in hindsight, it probably fucked me up more than anything because I still
Yeah.
am very fucked up in my ankle. But it took one of my platoon sergeants. Well, this is a new platoon sergeant. It took him coming back from ALC, and he saw me in a scooter, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Nothing, man. Just going to work." And he's like, "Why are you in a scooter?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I went to CA selection, made it, got a fucked up ankle, got checked out. Now I'm just waiting to see, what happens." And he's like, "No, what are you doing at work?" And I'm like, "I'm gonna fucking work. What are you talking about? I've been doing this for like the past couple weeks."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Who the fuck told you you had to come back to work?" And I was like, "My fucking squad leader." And mind you, this squad leader was fucking racist as shit. He
Oh.
hated fucking Hispanic. He hated Hispanics. He every fucking Hispanic, like most of us were Hispanics, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, Colombians, you name it, right?
Yeah.
Did not like us at all. He was Hawaiian, did not like us at all. And on top of that, he like during his like first initial counseling, he's like, "If you're not my rank or above, I don't give a shit about you." And we're like, "All right, sounds
Yeah.
good." Like fucking whatever.
That's
So
odd. Just a weird note. That's kind of odd considering you say he's a platoon sergeant, right? Like you're in
no,
a
he was my squad leader.
your squad leader.
Yeah,
Either
so
way,
so it was only like 8 of us.
in a like a FSC, or were you
Yeah,
guys?
yeah, I was in FSC. Yeah.
Yeah, like the mechanics are minority heavy. Like
Yeah.
they usually are. It's a lot of Hispanic and black people and stuff. I don't get how he would like. That's just odd to me. I never get that. You know
I
what I
don't
mean?
know, man.
Especially the dude being Hawaiian, like he's another minority. Like, what the fuck's your problem, dude?
I don't know what his
Never get
fucking
that.
deal was. I really don't. But he tried to smoke me with a boot one time because I was being a dick to him, and he was like, "You know what? Fuck you, do push-ups." And I was like, "Nah, man, I'm in a boot. My profile says I can." But I was pissed, and
That
it was
shows he's an incompetent fucking leader, though. Like
I
of
mean, you
those
have a
two
lot of
instances,
those
he's
though.
incompetent. Well, yeah, that's a whole nother topic,
Yeah.
But that guy just sounds incompetent as shit.
He's doing, from what I hear, he's doing great. Which I hope he lives under a bridge soon. But but that's the nature of the beast, right?
Yeah.
If you're shit at your job and you're a terrible person, you probably will get promoted pretty high.
Uh-huh.
If you're a good person that looks after their soldiers, looks after their people, you're not accomplishing the mission as much.
Because you're
So
not looking out for yourself. You're not looking out for
exactly.
yourself as much, and that's what gets you.
Yeah, that's what kind of gets you overused. And oh, you're good at your job, we're gonna keep you here, and that's what causes a lot of people to get out of the army. So I came back from selection, did all this shit. And as I'm having this conversation with him, he's like, "You should," my platoon sergeant at the time that came back from ALC, he's like, "You need to be in ops." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "You literally, by regulation, cannot be in the motor pool without steel toed boots. On top of that, like, we didn't really harp on that, but he's like, on top of
Right.
that, you have an exposed fucking like foot. We can't mitigate the risk on that." And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know that." He's like, "Yeah, dude, go fucking up, go up to ops." So went up to ops, and that's where I met Adam. He was my commander at the time, and we just fucking blended. Like he was really cool. I was really cool with him, and ops was like super easy. Did a bunch of shit for him, and then I had two surgeries on my right ankle, the ankle that I fucked up,
Yeah.
and then after that, they were like, "You've been on profile for too long. We're gonna med board you." And I was like, "Fuck." So I had to rush to get off of med board,
Eh,
off of my
Did,
profile after my two surgeries.
were you selected when you went to selection?
Yes.
You, so yeah, so I was gonna say they're gonna try to start a med board, but you got all these plans in place. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's crazy.
So I was fucking terrified, man.
Yeah.
And but I rushed to get off profile. I rushed to get ready and was fine, was good to go. And so I was starting the course in 2019, 2020 probably. One of those years. I really can't remember.
Was it during COVID really, or
Yeah, it was.
yeah? So it's
No, no,
2020
no, no,
probably,
no,
right?
no. End of COVID, so 2020.
Okay.
End of COVID. So 2019, I was still in the 82nd. I was still in my company. Adam was really cool about it. He supported me every step of the way. Shout out to Adam. And supported me every step of the way, and then went to the course. My first taste of fuck, I can't believe this happened to me in the army was when we were doing KLEs in the course.
Yeah.
One of the guys that was with me was from the Colombian Army, and he was trying to start up the civil affairs branch in the Colombian Army,
Yeah.
right? So he didn't speak a lot of English. So I was the only one, I was in that group that we were in, I was really the only one that spoke a lot of Spanish. So me and him blended together really well. We got along together really well. So I helped him with his KLEs. And when his KLE happened, it was terrible. It went bad. The fucking role players ate him up.
Yeah.
So they were giving him his AR. And one of my buddies came up to me. He's like, "Yeah, how did that feel, you piece of shit?" And I was like, "What?" He's like, "You know what day it is? It's the day you get fucking dropped." And I knew I knew he was fucking with me, but
Yeah.
he's like,
Yeah.
"You know what day it is? You know what fucking day it is?" And I was like, I looked at my watch and I was like, "Oh yeah, it's my birthday." He's like, "It's the day you get dropped." "Oh shit, is it really your birthday?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh fuck, my bad, dude. Happy birthday."
It's such an army thing.
Yeah.
You're a piece of shit. You're a piece of shit. Oh, happy birthday, dude. That's awesome, man. Yeah. Yeah.
That was so funny.
That's cool.
But later on after that, we had the month that we were in the field, right? And it rained, and this might have been at like late July. Yeah, it was definitely late July. And it was pouring rain. It was raining so goddamn hard to the point where I couldn't tell if I was pissed. Like if I was pissing myself, I couldn't tell if it was rain or piss.
Yeah.
It was that fucking bad. And I was like, fuck, this really sucks, man. And so we had to do all the things like, we had to go through, we still had to ruck everywhere and shit like that. And I remember them being like, "Hey, we're cutting it short. We can't see. We're gonna fucking bring the van in, but we still got to do the bona fides and everything." And I remember I was a watch guy, and the cadre comes up to me. He's like, "Do you see the van?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "Fuck, neither do I." And so the van's supposed to park like 50 meters away from where we are.
Yeah.
And I remember him getting on the walkie-talkie and be like, "Hey, we really can't see you. You need to pull up to the road like where we're at right now." And so he pulled up to the road, maybe like 10 meters away from where we were.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Do you see him?" And I was like, "I don't see a goddamn thing." And then he gets on the walkie. He's like, "Put your emergency lights on." And then I'm like, looking for emergency lights. He's like, "Dude, we still can't see you. Just pick us up." And I was like, "Oh shit." It was that bad. We couldn't see a goddamn thing.
That's crazy.
It was terrible. That was my moment of like, fuck, I really should have joined the Air Force or the Navy or something, because fuck, being out in the, I've had many moments out in the rain, rucking, just sucking dick at life, just sucking a big fat wiener. But this one just really took
That
the
happens.
cake, man.
Yeah.
This one just really took the cake. But finished the course, and during the course, you have to speak a language to get to civil affairs. You have to be proficient in a language. The day that we were choosing our languages, my computer was down, so they're like, "Okay, just fill out this form." Filled out the form, give it to the guy, try to get Spanish. Before we went out to the field, the NCOIC of the school, like the S3 of the school, was like, "Hey man, you don't have a language." And I was like, "What are you talking about? I speak Spanish. I filled the form out." And he's like, "What form?" And I was like, fucking, I don't know, the form that they gave us in the schoolhouse. And he's like, who'd you give it to? And I was like, I don't know, the language guy. He's like, what language guy? He kept fucking grilling me.
Yeah.
So he's like, listen, if you don't take an OPI, you're gonna get Mandarin. And I'm like, fuck.
Oh,
I'm like,
yeah.
that dude. Absolutely fuck that. So I took an OPI before we went to the field, got Spanish, and um, I wasn't at the graduation because they were like, you got to report to your unit. So skipped the graduation, report to my unit in like August, in process to the unit. And then they were like, yeah, we don't have anywhere for you to go now. And I was like, what do I do? And they're like, free leave until we tell you something. And I was like, okay. So
All right.
I had like 2.5 months of free leave just doing
Yeah.
whatever the fuck I wanted. And
Were you
so,
still at Bragg? Did you stay there? Or? Yeah,
yeah, I've
yeah.
been at Bragg my whole fucking career, dude. I've been at Bragg my whole career. And
Damn.
I mean, Bragg's not too bad.
I mean, I hear it's
It-
not bad. It's just that's a unicorn, somebody getting over 10 years of staying at one duty station.
It's fucking, it's a ride. I'll tell you that much. But
Yeah.
it's just trying to figure out what you want to do and where you want to go. And I knew I didn't want to stay in the 82nd. I knew I didn't want to, because I've seen a lot of people go because they're like, fuck that guy, fuck this unit and shit like that. And I knew I didn't want the 82nd to defeat me like that. So that's why I went civil affairs, got selected and all that shit. Went to my first unit. Uh, again, again, I was a fucking, I didn't mind it because it was a different world. It was great. Then my team sergeant had it out for me, and it was obvious because he kept giving me negative counselings out of nowhere when everybody thought I was doing well. I mean, mind you, I was very brand new to the team, and it's very brand new to everything. But I thought I was doing well, and I kept getting these fucking negative counselings, and I'm like, what the fuck? So I asked my team leader at the time. I was like, hey man, do you think I'm doing bad? Like, am I fucking up? He's like, nah, man, I think you're doing great. I was like, okay. And I asked my medic, and he's like, I mean, you could do better, but you're learning. And I was like, okay. And I started to ask other people in the company if like the CMOC. I was like, hey man, do you like, hey guy, girl, do you think I'm doing bad? Like, how do you see my performance? She's like, but I wasn't like going up to them just asking that, but I was like, in candid conversations,
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
what do you
yeah.
think, right? Everybody was like, yeah, you're learning, you're performing at what you're
And,
expected.
and it speaks testaments to you as you went to others and said, hey, am I doing a good job? Or like, what do I need to improve on, Because
Yeah,
people that aren't trying don't give a shit what others care about. Like you're
no,
actually trying to make sure, hey, am I in the wrong here or am I doing an okay job for what's needed?
because it was so confusing to me, and I kept getting these negative counselings, and it took my team leader to step in. And we were in TDY, and you can just cut the tension with a knife, dude. It was so bad. You can cut the tension. And we were staying at this firehouse, and we were doing some meetings, and then my team leader was like, all right, man, we got to squash this fucking beef. He's like, what the fuck is going on? And first thing I said was, I want to make sure what I say stays here, and we talk like men, and what's said here does not show up on a negative counseling, right? And my team sergeant was like, nope, absolutely not. And I was like, well, then I guess there's nothing to say here. So we did that. It was so bad. Like the culture in that team was so bad. But I mean, we learned to get along.
Yeah.
It wasn't until we went to a TDY in Texas, and we had some libations. We were doing stuff, and not like illegal stuff, but we were having fun doing our own stuff. And after we work hard, we play hard.
Right.
And so after we got to the hotel, we're having a drink at the hotel bar, and then he's like, "Hey man, I gotta tell you something." I was like, "What's up?" He's like, "I did have it out for you." And I was like, "Why, man?" He's like, "I don't know. I just hated how you came in. I just hated your work ethic. I just fucking hated everything about you." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, I just didn't like you." And I was like, "Fuck, man, that's really bad."
Yeah, that's
you
bold.
know? And I appreciated the candidness, but I was like, but he was moving to another team. I think he was going to MLC or something like that. So he
Yeah.
was like, I want to air out my grievances. So I was like, all right. And at that point, we had, in between Miami and Texas, we had gone to Mexico and we had taught some Mexican Marines about civil affairs activities, civil affairs operations. And he saw me teach a bunch of classes. He saw me get along with these guys, and he brought that up. He's like, "But I saw you in Miami, saw you in Mexico, and I saw you here, and I saw how you perform." And then it kind of all trickled back to like when you first got to the unit, you started, you were doing your best and all this shit, and I don't know why, but I just had it out for you, and I'm sorry. And I was like, "Well, I appreciate it, but that doesn't really do much for me now."
Yeah, yeah. Now it's already
You
set in
know?
stone, you know?
I was like, "What the fuck are you doing?" But man, that's I mean, it's the nature of the beast. I mean, what can you really do, right?
Yeah.
So after he left, I had a couple of team leaders, and they were cool. I'd gone to school. I'd gone to the course with one, and at that point now, excuse me, we're fast forwarding to 2023, where we were getting ready for our deployment cycle. So we were training, we were scheduling the training cycle, we were scheduling the ranges and all that stuff. I had 2 jumps in January, and one was just to get me ahead. I had one jump just to stay current. The other one was to get me ahead in like 3, 6 months or something like that.
Right.
That second one is where I landed super hard, got hurt, and I didn't go to the medics because it was a rough landing for everybody. The winds were pretty high. We had to get
Mhm.
grounded like 2, 3 times. And it was just one of those things that they were looking for that pocket to jump. So we jumped, didn't get seen for like 2 weeks or for like a week or so. And then the week that I was going to get seen, my first sergeant put me in a course, an advanced negotiations course. So I had to go to that one. I was still in a lot of pain. I would still go back to the company and everybody would make fun of me because I was still walking funny and I was still very stiff.
Yeah.
But everybody was kind of still walking stiff, but walking normal. So I thought it was normal because everybody was still walking stiff and shit like that. Everybody's still hurting. Excuse me. Wow, you might have to edit that one out.
No, you're
Wow.
good, you're good.
So I was I came back and uh my team leader made fun of me because he's like, "You need to go get seen." And I was like, "What the I mean, there's nothing to get seen for." He's like, "Touch your toes." And I was like, I could barely reach my knees. I could
Yeah,
barely reach
yeah.
my knees standing up. And he's like, "That's why you need to go get seen." So for a week straight, I went to the PA. They did like fucking dry needling. They did Toradol shots. They did a bunch of stuff. And 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks after the jump, I can't really remember. So probably like 4 weeks after the jump, I went to SEER school. And the worst part about SEER school was going there with
Yeah.
a fucked up back.
Yeah.
And it was terrible. But I came back and I took care of myself. The company was doing the ranges and stuff like that, and I was like, I need to get seen. So I got seen, and every step of the way, like the first fucking X-rays that I had, I took them back to my doc, and he was like, I don't see this going anywhere besides back surgery. And I was like, fuck. And he's like, I don't see it going anywhere, man. He's like, you can get a second opinion if you want, but I don't see it going lesser than this. So all of 2023, I was pretty much just getting looked at, just going through the army process, waiting for that surgery. And every step of the way, every person that I talked to, every physician, every provider, they're like, yeah, you need back surgery for sure.
Damn.
So finally in August, I had my back surgery. I was okay for I don't want to say okay because I was still hurting, but I was okay for like 2 months. And I don't know what happened, but I just went downhill after that. I just went absolutely downhill physically.
Yeah.
But in January is when I started getting seen a lot more, started going to physical therapy and shit like that, and I was not getting better. I started using well, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but in May around that time, I had gotten as much care as I could, and a neuro surgeon from Womack was like, "Try to touch your toes," and I was like, couldn't reach past my knees. He's like, "Well, baseball season starting. Try to fucking squat in a catcher position." And I was like, I bent my knees and I got a sharp pain on my back, and I was like, I can't do that. He's like, try to twist, and I was very stiff. And he's like, try to twist. I couldn't do that. And he's like, yeah, man, I'm sorry, but we're gonna have to initiate a med board. And I was like,
Oh,
all right.
no.
And I was like, all right, cool, sounds good. So it didn't really hit me at that point because I'm like, okay, you tell me I'm gonna start a med board. Got it. what else do I need to do? So they put me on a permanent profile since like April. And mind you, I'm still getting jump pay. I'm still getting
Oh
fucking
shit.
jump pay.
Yeah.
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 I had tried to stop my jump pay as soon as I heard the words back surgery.
Right.
Put in my paperwork, closed out my jump log. It was a pain in the ass. And then I was in the ITIS process, in the med board process, going to my appointments, going to the VA appointments and all that shit. And I was still getting jump pay. That was my main concern because I'm like, I've been getting jump pay for about a year and a half.
And they're gonna catch it, especially with the med board. So it's like,
so like July came around and I'm like, hey man, what do I need to do to stop my jump pay? I went to my air and he's like, all right, well you need to turn this and this and this in. Got all the necessary paperwork. So about like late August, early September, turned in all the paperwork for him. Mind you, at this point, I'm in the med board process of like, you're almost done. So I'm like, cool. So September, they're like, we sent it to S1. They're going to try to send it through not iPerms, IPSE.
Yeah.
Since I began jump pay before IPSE was a thing, they had to turn it in the legacy way. Yeah. So that means it had to go directly to finance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they had to send it directly to finance, do all kinds of shit. And finance finally got it around the time that I got my ratings, right? So I'm like, cool, got my ratings, but I'm still getting jump pay. What the fuck do I need to do?
Yeah.
So throughout this whole process, I'm like, I need to get a job. I need to look toward my future. I need to look through all this stuff.
Sure.
But the biggest voice in my head was, I do not want to pay back more than $1,500.
Yeah. So
I'm like,
yeah, it's it's $150 a month, right?
Yeah.
And you're almost going a year, so it's like, oh my God, stop.
Yeah,
stop.
it's more than $1,500. So
Yeah.
I'm like freaking out, right? My S1 comes back and tells me that finance got my packet. And I was like, cool, fuck yeah. And they're like, but they can't read the last page. And I'm like, fuck. So I print everything out, send it back. They all send it back, right? So now I'm fast forwarding a little bit, like a month here. We're going back to like a month ago. And this is like about 2 weeks before I'm clearing everything.
Yeah.
I preemptively clear CIF. Like I clear CIF early. I clear SPEAR early. Do everything I can to make these last 3 weeks pretty easy for me because my Peblo, which if you're not familiar with the MedBoard process, your Peblo is like your agent that's helping you through the MedBoard process, right?
Oh, okay.
She's telling me, okay, you got your ratings back. From this point on, you have 90 days to clear the Army and go on leave. And I'm like, okay, that's too easy. And she's like, no. In those 90 days, you have to burn up your leave or sell it and clear the installation. And I was like, fuck. I have too much leave. That leaves me about 3 weeks to clear everything.
Damn.
Yeah. So I start clearing everything early as much as I can. So I clear CIF early, which was surprisingly a breeze. SPEAR, clear as much as I possibly can. So 2 weeks before I'm actually supposed to go on terminal leave, I go to finance and I'm like, hey, they're like, what do you want? Like, what do you want? What the fuck? And I was like, I'm trying to stop my jump pay. Guy brings me in his office and he's like, what are you trying to do? And I was like, I'm trying to stop my jump pay, run my whole situation down for him, right? And he's like, okay, well, we need a copy of your jump log, termination orders, and all this shit. And I was like, cool, you guys have that. He's like, yeah, you just have to send it to your S1, and then they have to send it to me. And I said, I was like, they did. I was like, I did. And he's like, what's your social? Gave him my social, and he's like, oh yeah, it's in the process. It's in the process to getting to us. We could see it. We could see that your packet's en route, but it's not here yet. And I said, okay, what can I do? Because I don't want to be a victim of time where I've done all the steps possible to get my jump pay stopped, and I'm a victim of time because the paperwork didn't process in time, and you guys have it, but you guys can't process it, shit like that. So he's like, well, if you give me a memo signed by your commander terminating your jump pay, I could stop it right now. And I'm like, and this was November 20th. I was like, so if I give you a fucking memo signed by my commander with all my information, says termination of parachute pay, stating effective 20 November, I don't have to pay anything. He's like, that's correct. 2 days later,
yeah.
2 days later, I turned that into him, and they're like, we'll see you when you clear, because they're the last stop when you clear installation. And I was like, fuck, all right, cool. back of my head, but it's still fucking burning there,
Right,
right?
right, right. Because you're still like, this ain't gonna work or something.
Yeah, I have the money set aside, but I'm like, this is not
Yeah,
gonna
yeah,
work.
yeah.
So I clear everything. I go through. This was like last week. Yeah, this was like last week. So I clear everything. My last stop is on Tuesday or Wednesday of last week, and excuse me, I do fine. I get to finance. I'm like, I'm waiting for my final stamp, and he's like, all right, cool. Come in the office, sit down with the same guy that I talked to. It's like, you're gonna get your final pay this day. You're gonna get this pay and this and this. And that. He's breaking everything down for me, and then he says the words, and now you'll be clearing the army with no debts paid. And I was like, or no debts due. And I was like, can you repeat that one more time? He's like, you're clearing the army with no debts due. You don't owe the army anything. And I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
You
And he's
did
like,
it.
yes. I was like, oh my God. I was so fucking happy. And at that point, I was like, none of this is real. Nothing in the army is real. Like I had to do so much for like 6 months just to stop my jump pay. The fucking air wasn't, the memos weren't the air was telling me that I need to get certain memos, and those memos weren't correct, and then I needed a different memo. So I turned all that shit in. I was stressing. All I needed was this fucking memo signed by my commander, and I was like, fuck,
None of it's real.
none of it's fucking real, dude. Ironically enough, when I was waiting for that memo, it was like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday, or like on a Tuesday. My CMOC chief, he's going to be the new commander of the company that I'm in, and he's like, "What are you doing?" Ran down my whole situation for him, and he's like, "Yeah, he should be back soon. He should be able to sign that for you." I was like, "Cool. I'll just wait for him here if you don't mind." He's like, "All right, cool." So he's like, "What are you going to do after the army? Since you're getting med boarded?" I was like, "I don't know, find a job." Probably. He's like, well, a lot of people travel, go back home for a couple months. What are you gonna do? I was like, I'll probably go back home for a little bit, but I'm not gonna travel. And he's like, what are you gonna do? And I straight up was like, I'm gonna go on a bender. I'm straight up just gonna go on a bender, dude. I'm just gonna do as much as I fucking can. And he's like, I'm the company commander, like the new company commander starting January. And I was like, yeah, fucking what? So what of it, dude? And he's like, all right. I mean, I guess if that's what you want to do. And I was like, I gotta get it out of me.
Yeah.
But as of Wednesday, I am a retired disabled veteran.
That's awesome. I mean, it's not awesome, but it's congratulations,
It's
man.
yeah.
You got through the situation, and hopefully you're
It's
finding more ground coming out of it at least.
Well, it's still pretty new to me because I've only been on leave for about a week.
Right.
Because I'm still on terminal leave. My retirement date isn't until January 29th.
Okay.
So I'm still proper to the Army until January 29th.
Okay. Are you finding solace in it, or are you still kind of like, oh fuck, what am I gonna do?
I'm looking for jobs for sure. I'm
Yeah.
looking for anything and everything that I can find. I'm applying for jobs, but I don't think it's hit me yet because it's December. This is leave time frame. So subconsciously, my mind
Our
is
minds
like,
are like relax, like
yeah, in my mind, like we're on leave.
Right.
In my mind, it's like we're on leave. It's fine. As soon as that retirement day hits, I know I'm gonna be like, fuck. Because
Sure.
February, I'm not gonna have a paycheck coming in. My VA doesn't kick in until March, so I'm gonna be like, fuck. I need a job, fucking here soon.
Yeah. Your skill set. You talked about that with joining. You did your mechanic stuff for a while, which obviously you haven't done that in a while, but you did your civil affairs stuff. Does that translate well outside, or is it hit or miss?
It's kind of hit or miss, but it also depends on who you know, right? It
Sure.
depends on who you know. If you know somebody who can, but it's who you know. But what I'm finding out is a lot of these embassy liaison positions and like U.S. aid job,
Yeah.
and I specifically say U.S. aid because they're geared more towards officers. Because I had an interview, not like a podcast interview, but I had an interview because I had a paper for my bachelor's. I had to do a 19-page essay.
Nightmares, dude.
It
Nightmares.
was terrible.
Talk about
It was-
nightmares. It
was bad.
Sorry, I'll go
You're
off
fine.
on a tangent for a second. I just finished my bachelor's 2 months ago. 3 now.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I did it for 2.5 years straight of 2 classes every 8 weeks, just to like knock it out.
Yeah.
And I did a history degree like a fool. And the problem with history is you write papers out the ass. But my final paper was a 20-page thesis on Benjamin Franklin and like this whole thing. But either way, most of my papers were at least 10 to 12 pages. And
Mine,
it's a nightmare, dude. Typing that much because you're just
it's so
filling shit.
bad. It's terrible because, and I feel like I got bamboozled in mine because like as it was like 8 week
Bamboozled
classes I
fun.
did all online. And I feel like I got bamboozled because they were like, pick a topic anywhere. Like they were like, you can't pick like, they were like, pick a humanitarian topic, right? So I wrote on the effects of the effects on civil affairs in impoverished countries. So throughout the weeks, I should have seen this coming. I should have looked at the rubric. I really should have. But it was like the first week, write 5 pages, and then the second 2 weeks is like revise those pages. At the 4 week mark, it was like have 10 pages.
Right.
And I'm like, but I had written so much and like been so concise with it that I'm like, that's it. That's all I need. And then like it just kept adding on and on and on.
Yeah.
And it was like it has to be more than like 15 pages.
Yeah, and you're
I
like,
was like,
what am I
"Fuck."
supposed to fucking write about now?
Exactly, dude. It
Yeah.
was so fucking terrible, and I was like, God damn! I thought it was done at 5 pages.
Yes.
I was like,
It
fuck.
sucks, man.
But when I talked to that guy from USAID, he gave me a good amount of information. But he's like, Hey man, are you an officer? And I was like, No. He's like, Damn, that sucks. I would have offered you a job since you're med boarding. And I was like, Fuck.
Did they just want degrees or did they want the officer specifically?
They want the officers. They want
Man,
the officers specifically.
that commission
But, I mean,
helps. I don't get it, but it helps.
That's what the plan was. And as soon as getting to civil affairs, and you said you had a history degree, and you're like a fool. But dude, my bachelor's is in liberal arts,
Yeah.
and I only did that so I can because that was the fastest thing that I could get a degree in.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna do my degree, finish it up, go green to gold, and I would have been picked up by around this time.
Damn.
Got hurt. Life kind of diverted me. So
Yeah.
now I'm stuck with a bachelor's in liberal arts.
Yeah. But at least you
But-
got it, you know. A lot
At
of
least I
peo-
got something, you
Yeah,
know.
we both know some sergeant majors that only have a bachelor's in leadership
true.
or whatever the hell it is, you know, from Excelsior.
Yeah, there's a lot of retired first sergeants that don't have bachelors, and they're
Right.
having a hard time finding
Yeah.
a job because now companies are like, if you have a bachelor's, fine. If you have a master's, great. But as long as you got some sort of certification.
Yeah, I just tried talking to some people because I got about a year and a half left, and it's hard because I used to hear or talking to people. I heard PMP,
Yep.
that's a big one. I've
Project
heard-
management.
Yeah, and then like, or you go my route because I'm Seaburn, so we can do hazmat stuff, or you can and you can work for FEMA,
Yep. Do
environmental
EHS.
science, or not emergency
environmental
management
health
ser-
services, something like that. Environmental
Yeah.
health. If you go through environmental health route, pays a lot of
Right.
money.
But then I just had another guest on, Rico Danielson. He'll come out next week, guys. He was saying how PMP and all this stuff is like going away. He's like,
Yeah.
companies are starting to more look at the person themselves, hopefully, and like degrees, they're good to have, obviously, but that's more of a baseline.
Mhm.
And they more just want people with a personality that are going to get jobs done as opposed to these credentials, which I kind of like. But
Yeah.
me and you coming from this, we don't know how to look for those jobs. We don't have that network. So it's so hard to do. You got to find those old officers you worked with or dudes that you know got out and you're like, "Hey, what's going on with the world now?" Cuz I don't know what the hell to do.
Yeah, and it's hard because like you said, it's hard coming out of this world and going into the real world, especially because when we were coming, when did you come in? When did you come in the army?
I was in 15.
Okay, so yeah, we're
Yeah,
pretty much
it's
kind of like
pretty
the same
close, yeah.
generation. So when we were in, whether we were going to do a 4 year or a career, it was like at least I'll be marketable. I'll be a veteran. I'll be marketable. The hard reality is that doesn't exist anymore.
No.
Because everybody and their mothers is a fucking veteran, and they're like, "Cool, you're a veteran. What else you got?" That's the reality of things.
Yeah.
And that's fucking. It's a hard reality to come to because I thought I was going to be very marketable. I thought people were just going to be throwing jobs at me, and now I'm like, getting rejections for every single job that I apply for, and I'm like, "Fuck, am I gonna get a job?" It's just about who you know and really, really keeping the faith.
I would
And
almost equate it to this type of stuff too, where I don't know if you've had to do it, but you kind of got to just keep driving at it. You're going to get a lot of no's from people,
mhm.
but you got to keep pushing. Otherwise you're, you know, quantity is the essence there. Like, throwing 100 darts at a wall, a couple are going to stick, you know?
Yeah, and if you really pay attention, the army or the military in general teaches you resiliency one way or another.
For sure.
And unfortunately, that's a skill that not many people latch onto. But resiliency is pretty much the only thing that kept me alive this whole time.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much the only thing that's keeping me going because I'm like, you know what? This job rejected me. Another one's going to pick me up at some point, you know? It's being resilient is really the only, like, I think the best thing that you can ever do for any career.
I think I'm also a master resiliency trainer, so obviously I'm
There
perfect
you
at it.
go.
And that's the one thing it does teach you is that. And I have 4 kids and a wife. We've went through everything together, from deployments to money low to our kids doing whatever. I've learned one thing through all of it is that, you know, you persevere. Like, as long as you get through it, shit happens, you know? You got to just get through stuff. And it's the
Yeah.
hardest part.
And I mean, yeah, I was married, so I was married at some point, so it,
Yeah.
it taught me to be very resilient, be very
Hmm.
tough. Um, but yes, resiliency is one of those things that has really kept me alive, and I think it's the best attribute that you can really have, just not only as a service member, but as a person,
Yes.
because it shows that unfortunately, you're it, not it shows, but unfortunately in life, you're gonna have to eat shit, and you're gonna have to learn to like it,
Well, that's the
and that
whole that
that's
brings
just
us
how it is.
that brings us kind of to this. You know, you started a podcast called Wet Boots Podcast, which people that don't know, like, wet boots is probably one of the worst things that can happen to you, and you got to get through shit. But that's kind of like your whole shtick of your stuff is people getting through really hard times. What made you want to go into that part before all this? What made you kind of want to start talking to people?
So at one, I think it was after I got divorced, I wanted to do a podcast because I was like, you know what? It was just something that I thought would be interesting, like a new skill to have and stuff. I did like two or three, and it just didn't feel right. It just wasn't there. I just wasn't doing it right. So I heard I bought all the equipment, and it was after my divorce that I was just talking into the mic, not saving it, deleting it right after I was done. Right. So it wasn't until one of my buddies, I was throwing around the idea with one of my buddies, and he's like, "You should do a podcast where you talk to people and get their crazy stories, right? Because everybody has crazy stories in the military." And I thought, man, that's such a good idea. It's so original, not knowing there was like 1,000 beforehand.
Yeah.
So I was like, shit. I was like, as soon as I found out, I was like, shit. But I was like, okay, cool, yeah, that sounds good. But when I kept pitching it to people, every a lot of responses were like, I have no crazy stories. So it kind of shifted from crazy stories to just your story
Yeah.
because you could I, I was a mechanic, right? I could have the same beginning as another mechanic that went through the same time as me, but we both branched off into different futures, right? So that's what the premise of it was, and it wasn't until I got back from SEER school where we were rucking everywhere, and my boots were wet, and it sucked because I kept changing my socks, but no matter how many times I changed my socks, my boots were still wet, and I still kept having wet socks and wet boots. So it was when I was like, I think I stepped in a puddle and it was like knee high, and I was like, "Fuck this, man! I fucking hate having wet boots." And it just went off in my head, and I was like, "There's nothing worse than having wet boots." And that's what my tagline is towards the end of every episode. Is like, remember, sometimes you just have to keep going in wet boots,
Yeah.
and that's pretty much the whole thing about resiliency. Because sometimes you just I mean, regarding to the podcast, like sometimes you really have no option to keep going to wet boots because your spare boots are wet, all your socks are gone. What the fuck else? What the fuck other option do you have? You have no other option to keep going. The soggy ass wet boots.
Yeah. It when I first started this podcast, I feel like a it's like a spinoff because my first title for this podcast, if you look back even, there was like 5, 6 episodes, maybe 10. It used to be called Why We Serve with Benjamin Lake. And I would talk to people about why they serve. It was all veteran dudes, mostly guys I knew, and then people in my unit and stuff. And I started realizing, I was like, well, this is kind of niche, and there's so many, especially the, soft guys, they've really cornered the market on it with like, because it's a much more interesting story on their part. And then I learned, I'm like, well, everybody kind of has a story. Like you can talk to anyone about it, but in many ways, like you're saying with resiliency, like all that, or the wet boots, like everyone can relate to that in a time in their life when it sucked ass. And you're like, I guess I got to get through this, whatever.
Any type of selection, any type of school.
Yeah. Anything really, like college, like anytime you're trying to progress in life, there's that type of stuff. So I like that a lot. I think I've listened to like three now of yours. I've been able to get through.
Thank you.
And you put out good stuff, man. They were really solid because you hear like people really attest to struggle. Like everybody bonds over struggle, and it's so awesome to hear that type of stuff. And it's a bonus that I'm also in the Army, so like I like hearing those stories in general because they're very relatable.
Yeah, it's fun, and it like I said before, it forces me to network, forces me to get other people's point of views on the Army specifically, and I've had excuse me, I've had people that are influencers. I've had Viva La Vargas on. I've had Servant of Leaders, which was like 2 episodes ago.
Yeah, I've been meaning to listen to that one actually. The servant leader guy.
It's a great episode. I think he shed a couple tears in that one. But it's like all these people that you see the tip of their iceberg where they're at. Whether they're soft guys, whether they're regular Army guys, they're influencers, whatever they are, you see them at the pinnacle. Whether they've hit the top, like whether they hit their stride yet or not, but you see what they want you to see, right? But you don't know the story of how they got there and all the shit that they had to go through to get to there. And I'm like, it's a perfect way to talk to them. Just be like, hey man, if you want it. And that's how I talk to servant of leaders. I was like, hey man, if you ever want to share your story, I'm open, let me know. And he's like, oh yeah. Oddly enough, he was here at Bragg. He was here at Bragg,
cool.
and he served with my ex-wife. And I was like, this is not what, please do not tell me that you have my ex-wife like somewhere in your office. He's like, nah, man, no, don't worry about it.
Yeah. But have you done a lot of the in-person stuff? Like, have you been able to do that, or is it more a lot like this?
When I first started, it was all in person because I had no idea.
Same. Yeah.
I just did in person. When I first started, I started off with 2 mics, switchboard, and video recorded on my old Android phone.
Hell yeah.
And so, as time went on, I was like, okay, I need to get better at this. I need to get better equipment. So I did. And then I started seeing all these different apps out there. So I started trying them out, and I figured out which one's better for me. And then I started doing a lot of remote interviews because that was easier. And it's a lot easier, but then it's a lot less aggressive because for me to reach out to somebody that I don't know who's in the area, I'm like, hey, you want to tell your story? I recorded out of my house, out of a spare bedroom.
Yeah.
And it's just gonna be me and you.
That's
it's like, what the fuck? It's a hard sell.
Yeah.
It's a hard sell. So generally, people that come to my house and I do the in-person ones, it's like we either have a mutual friend or I know them or something like that. So a lot of the ones that are in person, like are the ones that are people that I know, or people that are just like, I've talked to for a little bit, and they're like, yeah, I'll come by. And I'm like, all right, cool. And I'm like, and I'll always say, I'm like, I am not gonna be mad if you're like fucking strapped and you come in here, Yeah. Because I get it, it's fucking sketchy as shit, but still, I'm like, I have nothing to fucking. I'm not gonna be
I'm
like, oh yeah, your ex-husband's here. You know,
yeah, I'm just
he's
trying to
coming
hear a
out of the
story.
fucking
I'm just
closet.
trying to hear a story. That's all.
Yeah, yeah.
Do
But yeah, it's
where
been a wild ride.
where do you we kind of had an inside baseball conversation before this all started. Where do you see yourself going from here? Like what are your goals with it and necessarily, or like maybe not goals, but like what what do you want to do? What do you want to get out of it in the next like year or so? What do you want to
with
do?
the with the podcast.
Yeah.
I haven't I haven't really thought about that. I haven't really put too much thought into that. I just want to we like you said, we had a baseball conversation about it, and for me the biggest thing is just getting people's stories out there, because I try to focus a little bit too much on the engagement and the selling of merch and stuff like that, and I focus so much on that, and I lost focus of the quality that's coming out, the quality that I'm putting out. So I really started honing in on the quality, and everything has started to grow. It hasn't grown exponentially. Like in the past year and a half, I only have like a little bit over 1,000 followers, but I'm very thankful for every single one of them.
Absolutely.
And and if my mindset going into every episode and coming out of every episode is, if at least one person hears this, then I've done what I wanted to do with this podcast. If at least one person listens to this, then I've done everything that I wanted to accomplish with this. Because it's not about, for me, it's not about reaching 1,000 people or 1 million people. It's just, this person has this story, this person has his struggles. If it helps somebody else out, great. If nobody listens to it, it's out there for somebody to listen. You know?
Yeah. I can attest to that cuz I've had moments where I'm doing this and I'm like do I really want to keep going with this or what? Like what's my goal here? And I I got a message like probably 15, 20 episodes in, and it was one of my old privates that I trained, and he messaged me and said, I've actually been struggling with some of my mental health stuff. I've been listening and I appreciate it because people opening up helps me a lot. And like that enough for me was like, I love doing this. That's
Yeah.
like, it's like the greatest feeling ever. And just knowing you're getting your message out there to people, hearing it like you're talking about, even if it's just one, like that's enough. And
Yeah.
I think you focusing on quality over quantity is like the move. Like you're gonna keep growing. This is gonna be a movement. So
I hope
I'm
so.
yeah, I'm excited to see it because I'm gonna keep listening, and it's so damn cool. Um, I appreciate you coming on and telling your story about like where all you came from. It was enlightening to me because that was such a different path for you of traditional army, soft community, and then a blind side of nowhere. I think that is a very hard road to tackle. And now you're going into something else outside of that. Like, who knows what job you're going to get, as well as taking on a podcast. I'm excited to see what's coming for you in the future, though, man.
Thanks, man. It's definitely scary because I don't. It wasn't in the cards for me at all. Like I said,
Yeah.
I wanted to go green and gold. I had everything lined up, and I felt like that. And I have an episode about where I open up a lot more about this, where I just felt like everything was taken away from me.
Yeah.
I feel like everything was taken away from me, and for a while, I felt very, very cheated. But I mean, I can't stay there for that long. I can't stay there for that long. I gotta. I could either. I have two choices. I could either stay there, in the sense of like I felt cheated. I felt everything was taken away from me, or I can do something about it. I can figure something out. And I've always looked at life in the lens of like, what's the 50-meter target? What's the closest target that I can get? And right. And so right now, for me, the 50-meter target is the podcast is still going to happen as long as I keep getting guests, and I might still do some solo. I got a couple of solo episodes. I might still do some episodes just for the homies, just a couple of solo episodes. But it's just one of those things that I can either stay here, feel like a victim, or I can do something about it. And I did something about it because I'm like, I'm not going to stay here. There's no fucking point. And I still find the good in things, right? I've always been very humorous. I've always been very, very optimistic. like a pessimist optimistic. Like I know things are gonna get better, but right now it's shit, you know.
Yeah.
So so like I try to look at the lens of like, well, what can I enjoy right now? And so right now I can't be very active because of my fucking back. So I'm like cooking a lot. Like yesterday I made like 30 tamales, you know.
Hell
I gotta
yeah.
find an outlet, you know. I gotta find an
Yeah.
outlet. So the podcast really helps me interact with other people, get out of the house, talk to people, give away some stickers, give away some shirts and stuff like that. And really just this is mainly where my social aspect comes from.
Yeah. Well, dude, you're gonna do great. I can see it.
Thanks, man.
You're gonna crush it. Okay. Um,
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you having you on, guys. Check out Leo's podcast, Wet Boots. I already listened to it. It's solid, and he just keeps coming out with better and better content. So check it out. Thank you, Leo, for coming on again. Yeah, it was a pleasure. So
Thanks, man. It's been a pleasure to. I was about to say it was a pleasure to have you on. I'm used to that part.
yeah, I get it.
It's a pleasure to be on here, dude. Thanks for letting me tell my story and all that good stuff in between.
Yeah. All right, guys. Take care. We'll see y'all next time.
We'll see.